Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk some more about Chiron. I got an idea to talk about Chiron in transit because of the videos that me and the lovely Echo made. We did a video about Chiron in general. It's loud as fuck. Chiron in general and Chiron transiting Aries right now. And so afterwards, later on that night, I was thinking about Chiron in transit in general. And, you know, this is a question that I'll get from clients and people wanting to know what it means when, say, Chiron is transiting their third house, or Chiron is transiting their 11th house, or what have you. Now, to be honest, I don't really pay that much attention to a planet or any kind of planetary body just transiting the house on its own. I like to pay attention to when a planet or planetary body is actually making an aspect with another planet or planetary body, right? So just Chiron transiting the third house. I mean, could you have some Chironic themes of pain and communication, with wounding and communication, with healing and communication? Absolutely. Could these come into play? Yes. Will you really notice them, these themes, if Chiron isn't making an aspect to a natal planet? Maybe, maybe not. That depends. If you happen to be in a third house perfection year and Chiron is transiting your third house, you very well might. That's different. I will pay attention to planets and planetary bodies transiting a specific house when the person is in that perfection year, is in that house's perfection year. But generally speaking, yeah, I don't pay that much attention to just planets transiting, or planets or planetary bodies transiting a house on its own. I really like to see it making an aspect to something in the chart, and then, you know, that those Chironic themes, for instance with Chiron, those Chironic themes are kind of activated in that house along with the house that whatever planet it's transiting happens to be in, and that kind of stuff. That's kind of when the activation happens. But I was thinking about past Chiron transits for myself personally, and other things that I've heard people talk about. And I do think that when Chiron transits the major angles, the ascendant, the descendant, the IC, and the MC, these do tend to be periods of time that are somewhat painful. They can also be healing, but they can be painful. It does depend on what all is going on in the chart, right? And what other aspects transit Chiron is making in the chart at the time that it's, say, conjunct the ascendant. But there usually is because the angles are so personal, right, to the time that you were born, that's how it's all set. Yeah, there is usually these particular transits seem to hit a little harder, usually. Like when you have which is why I want to do a video about it. So like when you have transit Chiron conjunct your ascendant, say, this could be a time when, like, your sense of self, there is some sort of pain involved with your sense of self, with the way that you naturally express yourself to the world. There could be pain physically too, because the first house can deal, and the ascendant can deal with the physical body. So there could, but be careful with that, because that's not at all universal. None of this is, but that's really not. Like, don't start thinking that because you've got transit Chiron transiting, you know, the ascendant, you're gonna have some sort of like physical issue, because you very well might not. A lot of the time it's more internal and emotional, mental even, you know, a lot of types of pain. But yeah, usually there is something going on with the sense of self in that regard. Now, this can also be a very healing time. This can be a very healing time for the person. But they generally have to go through this pain, or this painful process, almost like a painful, going through like almost like a rebirth, if you will, before they can get to the healing. That's kind of how it feels to me anyway. Then when you've got transit Chiron conjunct the IC, or the 4th house cusp, you might be looking at painful themes being kicked up around your home, your family, perhaps even your parents. I know I mentioned before about, some people think of the 4th house as always having to deal with the mother, and the 10th house is always dealing with the father, and vice versa. Like, the 10th house always deals with the mother, and the 4th house always deals with the father. I am not that rigid about the 4-10 axis. I think the parents can be found, both parents can be found in both houses. And then sometimes you've got one parent that is very clearly in, the 10th house, and one parent that's very clearly in the 4th house. But painful things with parents can come up when you've got Chiron transiting the 4th house too. And with like the core of your being, right? 4th house, I see, it's the core. It's the most conscious, private part of you. So there can also be painful things that are kicked up about that, that you need to heal through, right? And the only way to like heal through them is for them to get kicked up. Yeah. But usually those are the kinds of themes that you're going to be looking at when that's going on. Transit Chiron conjunct the Descendant, or the cusp of the 7th house. This could very easily have to do with one-on-one relationships of any variety. Oftentimes it is romantic relationships, but it really could be relationships of any variety. Pain surrounding those. You could even be looking at, the Descendant is the shadow. And I'm not talking about like the 12th housey shadow or the 8th housey shadow. I'm talking about like a literal fucking shadow on the ground. You know it's there. You don't pay any attention to it. You don't give a shit. That kind of thing. You ignore it. So that's the kind of shadow I'm talking about here. Well, transit Chiron conjunct the Descendant in a chart is kind of like those things that might get kind of ignored. They might not be able to be ignored with transit Chiron literally fucking that place in your chart. Like, they might not be as easy to ignore. Of course, I'm sure people try. The Chiron conjunct the Descendant is actually the one transit Chiron to an angle that I haven't had yet. But I'm sure people do try to ignore it. But it really feels like this particular one, there could be a fuckload of healing if you're having this transit going on. There could be a lot of healing that could be found by not ignoring the shadow. And I would also think that this transit could be slightly less painful if you already don't ignore that shadow as much, if that makes sense. And then then we'll go around to the midheaven. When transit Chiron is conjunct the midheaven, you might be looking at pain and wounding surrounding your, again, with your parents. That could very easily come into play. With authority figures, or with notions of authority. Your career, your reputation, your public standing, your public presence, all of those kinds of things could come into play when transit Chiron is conjunct the midheaven. But again, there's probably healing there too, right? Because there's healing with Chiron. There definitely is. So now I'll give you some, just so you can kind of see how this actually has manifested in somebody's life. I'll use myself as an example. Again, not universal. This is not how it will manifest for everybody. This is just how it happened to play out for me. When transit Chiron was conjunct my midheaven, this was around the time that my dad bounced. I was too young for this to have. I was young. I was like 6, 6 or 7. I've got to block some of it out, I think, but that was obvious. The midheaven or the 410 axis dealing with parents. This makes sense that there would be some kind of wounding around that, for sure, or some kind of pain involving that. Now, I didn't make it through that, obviously, but That's not necessarily the way that it has to go. It's just kind of how it played out for me. Then at the time that transit Chiron was conjunct my ascendant, this was a weird time. It was very painful. It seemed like the way that I naturally expressed myself when I would do this, there was always some kind of, almost like a backlash from the world around me. This is a really difficult time in general. I also had, like, Pluto was right around my ascendant too. It was a really difficult, time. But definitely my sense of self, there was pain involving my sense of self in the way that there definitely was. Again, I made it through, but, and I have healed from that quite a bit, but, you know, it is what it is. And then, more recently, I had transit Chiron, conjunct my IC, or my 4th house cusp. And it was around that time that I realized there were some really serious issues with the fucking asshole I was married to. like serious issues. Now, because my IC is in Pisces, I did try to ignore this a little bit. And once Chiron crossed over into Aries, for good, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So, yeah. But yeah, in retrospect, this was at the time that I was like, yeah, there's some real fucking issues at home that don't make any sense to me. Still don't. But Chiron is still in my 4th house, so I'm still probably healing from that. But I'm a lot better off than I was then. And that's what matters. And that kind of is what I'm, you know, what Chiron is about a little bit. You know, you are wounded, you are in pain, you are hurt, but you do heal, and usually are better off for it. So I know some people, I'm not exactly sure what orb you want to use. I do use an orb of 5 degrees applying and separating. Even with transit Chiron, I know some people, because Chiron does move really slow in some signs, some people would use like an orb of 3 degrees applying and separating, or 2 degrees or whatever. I use 5 regardless. But obviously when transit Chiron is the closest to being exact, or exact one of the angles, that's when you'll feel it the most, for sure. And also you want to pay attention to what the planetary ruler of the angle is doing. Like, let's say you had transit Chiron, it's in Aries right now, it was conjunct your descendant, also in Aries. Now you'd want to look and see what Mars is doing in your chart, like, and what transit Chiron is doing to Mars in your chart. Like, if transit Chiron is, say, trining your natal Mars, this could be slightly easier than, say, if transit Chiron was squaring your natal Mars. Could be a little easier. Could be. That's not guaranteed, but it could be, just because of the, you know, the harmony between the, you know, with the trine aspect versus the tension with the square. But yeah, you definitely want to take that into account when you're looking at things conjunct the angles or touching the angles. Definitely want to, and that goes for anything, not just Chiron, but anything. Definitely look at what the planetary ruler of the angles are doing too, or what's being done to them in the chart and via transit. Anyway, I'm gonna get going, but I will put where you can find me in the description box below, where you can get readings, whatever. And also I'll put where you can find the star cards if you're interested. Okay, I'll see y'all later.